The next matter to come before us this morning is in re KLF. Both sides will have 15 minutes to argue. The appellant may reserve up to 5 minutes for rebuttal. If you are the appellant and wish to reserve any time for rebuttal, if you let me know, I'm keeping track of the clock this morning. We'll keep you apprised of the passage of time. We've read the briefs and are ready to proceed when you are.
Good morning, may it please the court. This case came about as a result of the riots that occurred at Kenmore High School on the 11th of April, 2014.
Excuse me, counsel, it's usually good appellate practice to introduce yourself before you begin.
Oh, I apologize. My first time in the Court of Appeals, so I might be a little bit raw. My name is Mike Worko. Practice here in Akron, so apologize. They came about from the Kenmore riots. The main issue that I had on this appeal is the issue of self-defense. The trial court found that KLF did engage in fighting and that self-defense was present at one portion of the riot, but not in the second portion when he was apprehended. We contend that at all phases of the situation, KLF was engaging in self-defense. And the reasons are based off of the elements. Number one, he can't start the fight. You've got to have a reason to believe that he's in danger and that he can't actually, or he's not actually going to cause great harm on the other person. In this case, all that's present. From the beginning of the fight, he was in the stairwell. He was thrown back into the stairwell by the other students who trespassed onto the property. He was having his eyes gouged. Teachers tried to pull off this other student, and it was unsuccessful. As soon as they pulled the student off, the KLF gets free, the student tackles him again. Unfortunately, KLF gets out of it, gets free, starts climbing, going around the lockers, and another student hits him. So a second time he's attacked.
So let me stop you there because it wasn't clear from the brief that he was attacked the second time on the second floor. My reading of the brief was that after he was extricated from the fight in the stairwell, while he was still in the stairwell, that he was hit in the back of the head.
Well, it's my understanding that after he got out of that fight in the stairwell, he was coming back up onto the second floor, and that's where he was hit by the student in the back of the head.
And so the lockers that you speak of would be actually on the second floor?
Correct.
And we will have video recording of that?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, of course, I will warn you, the videos are somewhat difficult to follow as there's several cameras
Sure.
from different angles. But as he continued, after that second hit, he started making his way around through the crowd, and he made his way to the outside of the fight. So he at that point, had essentially disengaged. While he was there, or while he got to the outside, Lieutenant Simcox was coming in from the backside of him. Lieutenant Simcox, it appears, almost simultaneously grabs him, and at the same time KLF is looking into the crowd where he sees one of his attackers who was restrained starting to break free towards him. At that time, KLF lurches forward and he's taken down by Lieutenant Simcox. Now, looking at this reasonably, KLF perceived danger the entire time. This isn't an average schoolyard fight. This was the case where a person got punched, they punched him back, the issue resolved, and you knew it was over, time to walk away. From the beginning he was attacked, the teachers couldn't protect him. He had no reasonable belief that the police could protect him. There were 75 people in a melee here, and nobody's been able to stop him at this point. Even when the teachers stepped in, they couldn't do anything. So at this point, he's believing fight or flight. He tries to get away, or he gets out of that stairwell, tries to make his way around, he's hit again, and makes his way to the other side, where he sees his attacker coming. Now, we will admit, obviously, Lieutenant Simcox is coming in from the back and is saying, in the transcript it says he's yelling, no, 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 police. But from the mind of KLF, he's looking inward to the fight and seeing his attacker breaking free and coming at him for a third assault.
Can you give me an idea of the distance between them at that time? I know it's probably on the video, but...
It is on the video. From what I saw, it was a little difficult to perceive it. It would, maybe 15 to 20 feet would be more of a guess. I couldn't be 100% accurate on that.
Thank you.
But so he sees him coming, and all KLF did was lurch forward. He didn't run back in him, he didn't attack anybody, he just lurched forward as Lieutenant Simcox had him by the back of his belt buckle. And as soon as he made the lurch, Lieutenant Simcox put him in a headlock, subdued him, and that was the end of the incident.
What are we to make of the testimony of your client who said that when he re-entered the second floor, that he was angry and that he was seeking out the person who had hit him?
Well, I think when I look at that, I don't find that altogether that unreasonable.
Well, it's not necessarily whether it's unreasonable. Is it consistent with the self-defense that you're arguing, that he was seeking the person out for vengeance? I think, or words to that effect.
I do, and the reason I believe that is because he'd been attacked. There's so many people and so many things going on around him at that time. In order to protect himself, you would need to identify who your attacker is, where he is, and realize that that assault is done and over with. I believe he was mad, and maybe I can't justify whether he's mad and wanted to hit the kid. I'm sure a lot of people would, but as far as self-defense goes, he doesn't know what's going on. He testified that there were people everywhere. Everybody said it was just utter chaos. So I believe it is consistent with it, because in order to protect yourself, you need to understand where your dangers lie and where they're at. He'd been attacked twice. At that point, I believe it was reasonable for him to believe that the attack wasn't over. So for him to want to try and find his attacker, find out who was going to come after him, and see if that assault was over, I think that would make sense for him to do that.
And so if we can just push that forward a little bit, let's assume that he has been attacked, and let's change the facts a little bit. He's back on the second floor now, and he's looking for the person who attacked him and doesn't see him, but someone says, oh, he's now up on the third floor. Is it consistent or inconsistent for him to go to the third floor to seek him out?
I think in that circumstance, going up to a third floor may be enough break in time for him to at least have a reasonable belief that the attack was over. I think the distinction would be being on the same floor with the attacker, because now you're faced with that person, they have reasonable access to make a second attack, whereas if you're on a different floor, I think it's a little less reasonable to believe that that attack is still impending. So I do think there would be a difference in that. But based on my reading of the transcript, it appeared that most of what was going on was all in that congested area on the second floor. So basically the space between the attacks and the space that was confined to was relatively limited, and would create a subjective belief that until you're actually completely separated from that situation, you would still be in imminent harm. And one of the issues, looking at the self-defense, the judge had made, or the trial court had stated that he didn't have a duty, KLF did not have a duty to retreat, but he did have a duty not to re-engage. It's our contention that that contradicts itself in this situation, not in all situations, but here it does. Because it essentially asks KLF to get hit once, have his eyes gouged out, be getting pummeled on the ground to a point where even the teacher says, I hear my husband telling me, stay out of this, and she gets away from it. And then to break free, get hit again, and then to say, okay, well, you've been hit once, you've been hit twice, now just sit back and, allow things to take their course is a bit unrealistic. I don't think he had a duty, or he never had a duty to retreat, but in this situation, I think he needed to be engaged at all times. If you
Even in the face of the fact that Akron police officers were there apparently holding both him and the alleged attacker.
Well, in this case, a lot of this goes to the subjective, the mindset of KLF. And at this point, he wouldn't have had any reasonable expectation that either the police or the teachers were going to be able to stop this. They tried to stop it. His first attack, they couldn't stop it. So, at that point, he needs to protect himself. Now, the police were there, but there were only two. There's 70 to 75 people scrapping and fighting, and there's only 2 police officers. Lieutenant Simcox did grab him. At that point, like I said, it was relatively simultaneous to when he saw his attacker breaking free. And I think that's the difference, is the attacker wasn't subdued. The attacker wasn't in handcuffs, restrained, and basically kept out of the way. The testimony reveals that he was actually breaking free towards KLF at the time that KLF tensed up and lurched forward. So at that point, I don't think he had a duty to retreat, because based on what had happened in the prior few minutes, no one had been able to protect him. So how would a police officer holding him by his belt buckle protect him from an attacker charging at him?
Well, I guess the teachers would not have had weapons such as stun guns, batons, or guns, whereas the police presumably would have had those. Not to mention the show of authority. And I'm not sure I imagine that the record will show whether these were uniformed officers. Do we know?
I believe they were.
Okay.
I believe they were. And I do agree with you in that sense. Obviously, the show of force in a traditional situation could normally basically calm down anyone attacking. But in this case, the testimony shows that Lieutenant Simcox came up from the rear. So KLF was on the outside of this group of people, and Lieutenant Simcox was coming up from behind him. Lieutenant Simcox testified in trial that he never said, "Lieutenant Simcox, Akron Police, please stop," refrain, or anything of that nature. He was just yelling, "No, no, 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 no." So you have 70, 75 people yelling, screaming, fighting, tussling, and you hear someone coming up from behind yelling, "No." I don't know that I would necessarily register that in that situation. So I don't know that the show of force really would have been as apparent when there's so much commotion going on. You may not even realize or be able to focus on what's going on around you.
And counsel, you have just over 3 minutes remaining. You may proceed to reserve as you decide.
I think I'll reserve it this time. Thank you.
May it please the court, Assistant Prosecutor Rachel Richardson on behalf of the state. Your Honor, it seems to be that there's some confusion about the altercations that took place on the date in question. There was an initial incident that did take place on the stairs, and I believe all parties are in agreement that the initial attack was one in which the minor was permitted to use self-defense. And by the minor's own admission, the fight was broken up. One thing to recall about this entire situation is that the teacher and the young lady who both testified in this case were able to escape the melee and find safety in a classroom, while the minor indicates that he chose to go back into the fight, actually climb up the stairwell and into the hallway to pursue his attacker. And that's consistent with the testimony of the defendant himself. In this case, on pages 142, so first on 141, the defendant's asked, "Do you recall what happened in the stairwell?" At that point, he states, "I recall her," and in regards to her, this is the teacher, "trying to break up the fight." Everything doesn't really come back that clearly, but I know for a fact she was trying to break up the fight. After that, he states that when the fight did get broke up, I got up. Somebody did attack me. That was the trespasser, and that's what caused me to come back out into the hallway. He states he was basically rushed back out by the people, but later, on page 143, he states, I'm coming back out in the hallway. I was trying to find who attacked me, because I remember getting hit in the back of the head and turning around and seeing that person running out the door, and I went after that person." So he's indicating that he's, at this point in time, trying to find the person that attacked him, while the teacher that helped him and the young lady that helped him in the fight that initially he was a victim in, have both made it to safety at this point in time. They are no longer in this altercation. They're not even on the same floor as the altercation. The commotion, as the officers testified to, and all parties really testified to, was something that could be heard upstairs. Everyone could hear the stairwell. They could hear the sounds upstairs from the floor above them. and they reached for safety downstairs, and they held doors shut to try and prevent these people from getting inside. However, the teachers were able to get back inside the classroom and find safety. Later, when the state was asked about this case, 2 officers were able to give testimony, and this testimony is consistent with the state's presentation of this case, where the minor was the one who was inciting and trying to get to the attacker who was at this point in time subdued by another officer. On pages 47 and 48 of the transcript, the officer indicates that he grabbed and handcuffed the attacker, escorted him back down because that's where everything kept going in the offices. They were arresting these young men and putting them in handcuffs in a lower room to remove them from the floor entirely. So he indicates he's walking this gentleman down, and he sees the minor coming towards him, mouthing, saying, "I'm effing," and he indicates that this minor is the minor in question today, KLF. He keeps mouthing, he keeps hearing what is being said, and he keeps coming towards the officer who has the assailant in his custody. There's no indication from that officer that he felt like he was not in control of the situation, like he felt he was not in control of the assailant. On pages 49 and 50, it further indicates that he's being followed down the hallway, and that he indicates for another officer to intervene and get KLF to prevent him from further following them down the hallway.
Now, was the person who this officer was escorting in handcuffs at the time?
He was unable to get handcuffs on him yet, but he was attempting to, and I believe also in part because he's being pursued, he's just trying to remove everyone from the situation to be able to handcuff him. He does indicate in the record that he's attempting to handcuff him, but there's no clear evidence that he had handcuffed him at that point in time. On pages 97 and 98, Officer Simcox actually testifies to his takedown of the minor. He indicates that he had to headlock him, that he was struggling, trying to get after the kid that Officer Cooper has. He had to physically pull him back. He had to use a pivot technique to remove KLF from continuing to try and move forward. And he's saying that he's just part of the group that's being arrested. It's fairly clear from the record that both officers involved in this altercation had consistent stories where they're attempting to remove a party from this attack, and the alleged victim, KLF, at the second indication is actually the attacker. He has resumed attacking. He is no longer in a self-defense mode. He's also indicating in the record that he was angry at this point in time and out to get the person that attacked him. It's not an action of self-defense when recognized by this state, by really any of the appellate courts in the state, that one is able to act with anger and pursue another party with a nonviolent action when they have been removed from the situation. This is not an
Well, the video, excuse me for interrupting, I'm interested in the testimony of the officer who was escorting the other young person, whether the video will show the officer escorting him and KLF following them or, pursuing them. Are we going to see that on the video?
I believe so, Your Honor. The other instance in that would be that there was no need for KLF to go upstairs or into the hallway. He could have gone back downstairs to safety. He had no need to pursue another person into the hallway further into this instance, which I believe KLF's counsel himself has admitted was something that contained many people and was kind of a riot of sorts, as all these parties have been charged with. It's not reasonable for someone to enter into the riot to pursue someone they believe has attacked them. Safety wouldn't really call for you to pursue that attacker when there are other attackers around you. It would pursue for you to perhaps remove yourself from the situation rather than furthering any type of violent action, especially in a school. Any indication that these two officers might not have been in uniform really isn't of relevance when we have a school situation. Anyone would be perceived as perhaps trying to break it up would be someone who would be considered helpful. In this situation, KLF himself admits that he was saved by a teacher, he was saved by another student. Those two were not in any sort of special uniform.
Was he saved by the teacher, or was the teacher decided it was? I mean, it sounds to me, at least from the appellant's brief, that the teacher made a valiant attempt but at some point realized that the teacher could not stop the assault that was occurring in the hallway, and so the teacher retreated. Is that not what the testimony reflects?
Your Honor, I believe the testimony reflects that they couldn't solve all of the problems in the hallway, that they began again, but that the one gentleman that was on top of KLF, or the 2 or 3 people that were on top of KLF in the stairwell, they were able to break that up. And KLF himself is able to admit that the fight gets broken up and that he's able to step away. That's when he says he gets hit again and pursues it. Really after the teacher's able to intervene and stop that initial attack where he is the victim.
Hit again by the same individual or hit again by a different individual?
That's unclear. Your Honor, I believe the defendant himself says that he thinks that this is the person that attacked him and that's who he attacks and goes after. But it's unclear if that's a new party or one of the ongoing parties.
Is it clear that the individual that he is accused of lunging toward when he's back in the hallway, the individual that attacked him the second time? Do you understand? Did you understand the question?
No, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Okay, so we don't know if the second assault is the same attacker as the first assault. Do we know if the second assault is the same person that he was trying to get back at by the time they were back in the hallway? Same.
The minor admits, he says that I see this person, this is the person I'm going after, I'm retaliating. That I'm angry with him for hitting me and that's who I think it is. I saw him running and I pursue him.
So when we get to the issue of the charge, which is, what was he ultimately charged with? Is it riot or the assault?
Assault.
Okay. And so is that limited to the fact that when he's on the second floor, he sees the person whom he believes attacked him, and he tenses up and lunges at him? Is that basically it?
Well, Your Honor, I apologize. Actually, the charge of riot was merged with the aggravated riot charge, and he was adjudicated delinquent on the charge of aggravated riot only. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
I will state that...
And is that the 4th degree felony?
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry, the 4th degree felony.
So that's my question. It seems like what this all boils down to, I understand, the analysis of self-defense in the stairwell versus, the actions that he took in the second floor hallway. But the gravamen of what he is charged with appears to be that he sees this person who he believes has attacked him, breaking free from restraint, and he tenses up and lunges toward him. Would you agree that that is the basis of the felony charge?
No, Your Honor, I believe that that's only a minor portion of what occurred. Really, the minor in this instance says that he's hit. I mean, really, there's no videotape to verify that. There's no other testimony to verify that he was actually hit. This is what he says is the reason why he attacks the other party. He sees this party. He pursues them into the hallway. He sees the party being escorted out by an officer, and he's pursuing him actively as the officer testifies. He's mouthing after him. He's trying to get him. He's angry with him. He says that his cousin's trying to hold him back. Then when an officer intervenes, he's continuing to try and pursue that party. Not so much that he's breaking free. That to me would be another indication where he could turn and move in the other direction. At all times, he's continuing to move forward and continuing to actively act out verbally and physically in a forward motion. If there are no further questions, Your Honor, Honors, at this time the state would request to uphold the decision of the court. Thank you.
Counsel, you have 3 minutes, 10 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Just a few clarifying points just on as far as basically where Lieutenant Simcox engaged with KLF. Looking in the transcript and based on Lieutenant Simcox's testimony, it appears that, like I had mentioned earlier, he came up from behind and just grabbed him by the belt buckle. And when he grabbed him by the belt buckle, he felt KLF tense up and lurch forward. And at that point, he testified that he knew, or basically he didn't know what he was going to do, so he put him in a headlock and basically flipped him over, his hip tossed him over onto the ground, and the incident was over. This isn't a case where KLF was hovering around the corner, or hovering around the outside of the crowd and trying as hard as he could to charge back in there, and Lieutenant Simcox pulling him back, trying, saying, "Son, stop." None of that happened. He just grabbed him by the belt buckle, fell alert, took him down. Simple as 1, 2, 3 right there. So it wasn't a continued course of KLF trying to seek out and find trouble.
Is that evident from the video recording?
It seems fairly evident, and Lieutenant Simcox testifies very, very close to as I did, as you will see from the record. So,
But he only saw him, I guess, once. I thought I'd read that Lieutenant Simcox came up from the first floor on the elevator.
correct.
So he would have walked in once the elevator opened into an ongoing situation. The question, I guess, becomes what happened before that time and whether your client was pursuing this other person before Simcox comes into the frame.
Right, and, excuse me, as far as testimony reveals, the only thing we really have is the beginning of this, where the pile-up in the stairwell is occurring, and when Lieutenant Simcox enters into it. In between, we have KLF's testimony that he was hit in the head, and his cousin was helping him get through the crowd. There was no evidence presented by the state from any witnesses that could tell any story other than what KLF described in there. So, other than, like, as I stated before, the cameras, but it's a little difficult to see a lot of what's going on in there. But, yeah, the testimony reveals the beginning, the end, and then KLF's testimony as to what happened in the middle. And again, I know he said he was angry, and he was trying to seek who found him. And again, the anger part's reasonable. He's a kid, he's mad, he's been hit twice now. But the seeking out part isn't, would definitely be consistent with the self-defense, because he needs to find out who hit him. It's unclear who hit him that second time. So to have your eyes gouged, tackled, break free, and then you're hit again, you think it's one person, but you don't know for sure. You're going to go looking to find out who did this to me, to protect yourself. And as far as the other teachers getting into classrooms to get away from it, the difference is the teachers weren't being attacked. The teachers weren't getting punched in the head, minus the few that stepped in and maybe caught a wild elbow.
And counsel, I have to inform you that you've reached the end of your allotted time for today.
All right.
Thank you both for your presentations this morning. The court will take the matter under advisement, issue a written decision, which will be mailed to both sides, as well as posted on our website and the House Supreme Court website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.